This week, Deviant Ollam, physical penetration specialist at Red Team Alliance, will delve into lockpicking and physical security. Next up, John Matherly, the creator of Shodan, joins us for a segment about the state of the internet exposed services. In the security news, the greatest exploit in the world. Throw some more logs on the Log4j fire. Lockpicking with a zip tie, hacking metal detectors. Please disclose your vulnerabilities here. Bugs in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth have an interesting relationship. Not so secret backdoors, taking over domain controllers, and interesting pre-copulatory behavior in Darkling beetles. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Keeping up with security issues across thousands of web assets without the right approach to web application security is a daunting task. Get ahead with web vulnerability scanning automation from NetSparker, a leader in dynamic and interactive application security testing, known for its ease of use and accurate results. Detect a wide range of vulnerabilities in all legacy and modern web applications, address security bugs at scale by automating the confirmation process, automatically prioritize vulnerabilities, and assign actionable tickets to the right developers in their native workflows for rapid remediation. For more information on how to scale application security with ease, visit securityweekly.com/NetSparker.
Tonight on the ABC Christmas special, Conrad Poos and his dancing teeth. The lovely Lennon sisters will perform I Want to Be Sedated, funny man Rich Little, Aaron Leyland and his singing elephant, and scientist Paul Asadorian will attempt to demonstrate a recursive function in the COBOL programming language. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 722, recorded on December 22nd, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left is the very festive-looking Dr. Doug White.
Hello.
Welcome, El Doctor.
I'm here. I didn't have my nails done this time, though, so I had my black fingernails in celebration of...
You were like doing some home improvement flooring or something.
Yeah, my old house is getting ready to sell, so I have to have all that nastiness torn out and the remnants of pre-copulatory behavior.
Yes, yes. We love that. We're going to see how many times we can say that word before we cover the non-security story of the week.
All behavior is pre-copulatory. or maybe. Even post-copulatory behavior is really just pre-copulatory behavior if you do it right.
Oh, my God. What's the movie with the street sign that they go, no parking after midnight, and they look at it, they go, is it before midnight or after midnight now?
Mr. Josh Marpet is here with us. Is that Dude, Where's My Car? Maybe?
Could be, yeah.
I don't remember.
I think you're right. I think that's Dude, Where's My
Harold
Car?
and Kumar Go to White Castle. It's one of those kind of movies. It's got to be.
It could be Harold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us.
I'm still stuck on the mind bend of pre-copulatory, post-copulatory here.
Yes, it is a mind bend. Get your festive sweater on. Very nice. Mr. Lee Neely is here with us. Lee, welcome.
Well, it's festive to be here. I'm Merry Christmas, you filthy animal.
Nice. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Thought I would grace you with my presence one last time this year.
Yes.
Ho, ho, ho.
Nice to have you. Let's see. We've got an announcement. If you've got a specific guest or topic you would like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, submit your guest suggestions for guests, or your suggestions for guests, and we'll cover them, the guests, with a blanket maybe. Or if it's a topic, we might interview it. In any case, go to securityweekly.com/guests, complete that form. We review those on a regular basis, and we'll get back to you. Joining us for this segment is none other than Deviant Ollam, a physical penetration specialist and member of the board of directors of the U.S. Division of TOOL, the Open Organization of Lockpickers. Joining us tonight to talk about some lockpicking, some physical security. Deviant, welcome.
How's it going? Hey, tell me, why was somebody's computer not allowed at ShmooCon?
Why is
it
that?
refused to get its screenshots. Always have to give props to the con, trying to do everything they can to keep everyone safe. Fingers are crossed that we'll get all there this January.
I hope so. I know Heidi's been working hard as she normally does on ShmooCon, so I hope so. Deviant, I think like many of us in the security community, I learned something about lockpicking, if not the fundamentals of lockpicking, probably directly from you. I think so many people have at least kind of get that introduction. And I want to thank you for that, because I think it's really worked its way into our community. It's worked its way into the culture here at Security Weekly. It doesn't matter what job title you hold here at Security Weekly, you learn how to pick locks. Which comes in handy. It's kind of funny, and you have a lot of these stories. I'm sure you've heard a lot of these stories, right? So we become like the lock picking hub. So if anyone in the building is locked out of something, they come here for help.
Yeah,
which I think is great. I mean, it's such a community thing, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, for a very long time. I mean, I was definitely not the first by a long shot to be talking about this, but it seems like I was just really fortunate to have the freedom to travel, and a handful of us were just saying yes to like every little and large con and everyone in between. So yeah, we would run into you at, Boston events at Source with Stacy and everyone. I remember like Quahog Con was that little event in Rhode Island once.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would always try to show up, and it was great. It's still great, but I don't have the same freedom I used to back then. I feel like I was doing like 2-3 cons a month for a couple of years there, and it was a very special time.
Yes. Of course, now, with the pandemic, that changed a lot of physical conferences. But I also am curious, Deviant, I mean, what you do today is very much physical security assessments. Is that correct?
Yeah. Breaking into buildings.
How has the pandemic impacted some of that? I'd imagine, a lot of folks work from home and don't go to a building. And so how has it impacted that particular aspect of our industry?
Yeah, it's a real double-edged sword. So there's the idea that offices, as you point out, are much more empty. So you might say, well, that's great. There's fewer people there. There's less, you're less likely to get interdicted or bothered. And that's true. But there's fewer people there. And in certain environments, you are now standing out a lot more. Like, who the hell is this guy? Why? If you're one person in an office of 200 and you're just kind of walking somewhere with purpose, okay, nobody cares. But if you're one person in an office of 20, they're like, wow, what? I haven't seen a new human being in months. Why are you here? And the same goes for masks, right? If you're wearing a mask, you're not as identifiable. You can blend in, but masks have become this weird cultural people's identity. And depending on where you are in the country, trying to wear them, we've had jobs where we're on the pre-call, and HR is like, oh yeah, we have a strong mask policy, and we have our sanitizer station at the door, and we've shown up, and the whole office is unmasked. And you're like, well, shit. So what am I going to do now? Am I going to be that guy from the city where I live somewhere that every place is 100% masking, right? So am I going to wear my mask and stick out?
Right.
Or am I going to not wear the mask, but then people can see my face? And again, you got the same problem I just said, who's this new person? So it varies a lot. The real thing with us is always trying to deliver some value. And the fact is that with office space is changing how companies use it nowadays. And that means we have to always evaluate whether or not testing the office means what it used to mean. If you've got a whole office and it's little more than your server room, then why am I testing? We used to try to steal laptops, or we used to try to steal stuff out of, common storage areas. Those aren't in use anymore. So it limits a lot of what's useful to even test in certain buildings. And it's pared down and pruned down a whole lot what we test. And a lot of our evaluations are focused on, all right, can I get into that data center? That's all you care about, because no one's showing up with laptops, no one's showing up with paperwork, no one's showing up at all. And it's changed a lot.
But do you think that there's going to be a time in the very near future where we're going to begin doing physical pen tests against personal homes, or say high-profile executives, because the nature of work and where sensitive data and laptops and devices now live?
To some degree, yes. Now we're all for NDA'd here, but I still can't divulge exact clientele. We at Core, the Core Group has done executive homes for some time now for a different like caliber of clientele. Usually they're like real high profile people who are like hiring DeBecker and Associates for their executive protection. We've done home assessments at that level. I think we're going to see that trickle down to your sort of mid-level executives more. As far as your run-a-day employee, like work-a-day run-of-the-mill employees, and I'm not denigrating anybody, we all have a job to do, but I think it becomes impractical to do a on-site with all those employees, but maybe we're going to see something that's more common if you, again, in like the government space, or if you're handling certain types of controlled information, you do have to do an attestation about your home office. I know that to get access to certain resources in the government world, we had to do this for all of our home offices at Core. Like we had to say, yes, we are using this caliber of lock. We have this type of alarm system. Yes, we have a GSA container like in our offices at home. And I think maybe companies are going to start adopting that kind of question. Like, okay, well, when you have this company endpoint, where does it get locked up at night? Where does it get locked up when you leave the house? So maybe that's something that we'll see guidance coming out on. And I'm happy to, I just gave a talk a few months ago about gun safes and gun storage because, as many people know, during the pandemic, a lot of firearm owners got into that game. So I'd be happy to tell people about laptops and data storage as well.
Mm. Yeah, I'm concerned doing a physical pen test in someone's home. Speaking of guns, like that would be dangerous in my opinion, depending on maybe where. But I would think that'd be dangerous. No, would that be more of a observe from afar kind of assessment rather than actually breach someone's home?
Yeah, the idea of targeting an employee in their actual home, like that's, in my opinion, that's dirty pool. I think it's that's like sending a phish email to someone's personal Gmail account, even if you know they're using it for work and they shouldn't be. Even if you learn something good and actionable, are you actually undermining your security because you're ruining your goodwill with that employee? Are you opening up to something that's legally actionable? Yeah, I don't think we're going to see that. I wouldn't take a job where an employee said, hey, this is my subordinate team. These 3 people, here's their home addresses. Break in.
Right. Yeah.
First of all, they don't have standing to do that, right? You can't just do that. But even if they said, well, try to monitor this employee, like trail them around town, see if they use their laptop at Starbucks and leave it unattended.
It's illegal.
Yeah, that's ethically shaky for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that might actually be illegal. We were long ago, so we were doing physical pen tests back in the early 2000s and stuff like that. Did a couple of executives that with their permission, they knew we were doing it. We went out to their residence and looked at their stuff because they actually asked us to do that. But we talked about that, about following people, and I was talking about we had consultants who were using company laptops because we had one get stolen in like a coffee shop. And corporate legal said no, that was not going to be not going to fly to start following people around and snooping on them and spying on them and all this kind of stuff in their personal lives. And it was really tough to define. Now I don't know, but I mean back then it was really clear when they're in the office. That's different than when they're at home. But now it's complicated. But yeah, I don't think I would take that job either.
No.
Yeah, the juice is not worth the squeeze on that one, both legally and with employee rapport.
I mean, I have a PI license, and so you can actually sort of spy on people, but it's real twitchy, and you have to be real careful. And we don't do those jobs without an attorney giving us advice because those laws differ from place to place. They're different in different states and different cities, and some of them actually have laws that say, you can't do this, you can't do that, and so it's real twitchy. I did want to ask you though, do you think it's gotten better? I mean, when I first started doing physical pen test stuff, it wasn't like government contractors and Department of Defense and secret stuff. It was just like companies that were subject to Sarbanes-Oxley, and we were doing a lot of physical pen tests at these corporations. They were horrible. I mean, they had zip for physical security. I mean, and they didn't even like being told they needed physical security. They might have a receptionist sitting in a lobby or something, but those people hadn't been trained on spotting intruders or any of these kind of things. And do you think that's gotten any better?
Yeah, I definitely think it has. And we can say, not that there's ever a end final, you're done now goal for security, but maybe we've only moved 10, 20% down that line. And someone, if like a student in school is like, well, I got a 0 on my test last semester. Now I got a 20%. You might say, well, that's not great. But if someone is, completely physically, like they've never tried to do any jogging or running, like they just can't run up even a flight of stairs. And they say, well, I've been trying to run and now I can run 25, 50 yards without getting winded. Someone who's an experienced runner might be like, wow, that's got a long way to go. But I'd rather look at it as that person. I'm like, well, you know what? You're 2 months better than you used to be because you've been trying it. And we can celebrate those wins while recognizing there's still a long way to go. So yeah, there have been wins. I think it's really neat that bypassing the really low-hanging fruit stuff, it's become so well understood, even in fiction at this point, where I've seen latch slipping and under door tools and other things like that in popular shows and in like books. Like I know authors who write thriller novels and stuff. There's actually, my dad was just reading a book. I think it's called The Night Lock. It's like a locksmith who breaks. It's some detective thriller thing, and like the author is legit talking about real things that we cover in the security world. So I think those kind of attacks are better understood, and companies are actually trying those $10, $20 solutions to make like door fitment improvements and to make underdoor like shrouds around the handles. That's great. There's still plenty more to do, and we will educate them whenever they ask us, but it is a point of progress. And likewise with social engineering and phishing and challenging unknown people in a building, are there plenty of people who still will slip up? Yeah, but a lot more people, like I get challenged more on site at jobs in big cities or in rural environments, you name it. I get more confrontation than I used to years and years ago. And that's a good thing.
It is a good thing because I think people tend to think backwards about, because I want to harp on the rural versus like a really crowded environment. Because I always tell my wife, I'm like, she's like, when we go to bed, we need to turn all the lights off. I'm like, no, like all the outdoor lights need to be on. I'm like, because like a thief or someone who's trying to do breaking and entering, like lights are their worst enemy. That means anyone can see them, right? And I also think that similar kind of thinking, if you haven't really kind of dug in and run through the scenarios, you may think, well, my physical location in the middle of a bustling city where there's a lot of people is more secure because there's more people there than my rural building where there's like no one ever around. But I think all those things, like the opposite is true, right? And I think many of us have stories on trying to get into places in a rural area. I've heard these stories time and time again. Because like you said earlier, Deviant, just because you're there, you stand out. Like there shouldn't be someone standing there. And it's oftentimes diligent employees that are like, wait a minute, no one's supposed to be there. I'm going to go question that person.
Yeah. I mean, Tyler
you've
and
also
I
got in a rural area, you've got
okay.
the fact that it's small town. And in a small town, everybody is nosy as you can possibly imagine.
Yes. Well, so sorry, what were you saying, Deviant?
Tyler and I did a job together, like in a very rural area. And I think the only thing that really saved us, other than us, kind of knowing what the hell we're doing, was the fact that it was a big facility. If it was a small facility, we would have just felt really out of place there.
Right.
Because again, like, if you're in a small place, the best job I did, and I define best as we got nailed by a couple of people fast, was a rural food production firm. They were in the, food distribution and agribusiness. And yeah, like Sunday afternoon, I've told this story once or twice. I don't know if I've told it on like a big show like this, but yeah, my team, we scoped it out. We looked around. We're like, all right, small town, Sunday morning, everyone's at church. We're going to rock this place. It's going to be dead. And we were on premises. There was one employee and literally wasn't even on site. He was driving by in this town, this one horse town. And he looked and he was like, who's that person walking across the parking lot? Didn't recognize him. Kay turned in the road, pulled onto site, and then started going building to building till he could find the interloper. And we had a whole story. We had badges that worked. Like he saw somebody going between another building and he saw a badge work. He's like, I don't know that person. And he kept walking around until he found us. And he's like, hey, just sorry, I saw somebody out in the parking lot. Yeah, that was you. And so what are y'all doing here? And we're like, and we had it, we're professionals. Like, oh, well, we got hired by so-and-so. We're here from the Kentucky building and they wanted us to come over here to Wyoming to this for the one day. We're making sure the system's up. He's like, nope, you wouldn't have come from Kentucky. I would have heard from Keith. You're not Keith. And I didn't hear. And we're like, damn. And and it was just because he had worked there for decades and he had this sense of ownership, and he, like, this little company, he's like, no, I feel like on his day off, pulled into the parking lot.
It's the best defense. It really is. It's the best defense.
I was thinking this the other day. Do you think that the gig economy, because of the nature of it, now there are so many strangers everywhere. Like I was like the neighborhood I live in now, like everybody kind of knows each other, and but all of a sudden here's an old Toyota Camry sitting there on the side of the road with the flashers on, and there's a guy walking around the property. And
you're like, oh, that's an Amazon delivery.
Yeah, is it Amazon? Is it FedEx? Is it, because they all do this stuff where they've just got, and they all have badges and stuff, but you can't see those, and they don't have FedEx trucks. They've got there's an old Toyota. In fact, today I saw a Toyota Camry in my driveway. I was like, who's that?
Right. Yeah, but they got an orange vest on with the green lines in it.
You can only get those if you work for FedEx.
Right.
I mean, but I would. Do you think that's going to change?
He's like, I got a whole closet full of that stuff.
No, I literally just looked on eBay for like Amazon Prime stuff. I'm like, yeah, man, full delivery jacket, rain slickers. I just realized I should add that to my stuff. And yeah, man,
you could just sign up on one of those delivery sites for like Laser Ship or something, and you'd actually be an employee, and so then you've probably got a like legit ID that you're walking around with, and you just maybe aren't delivering there today.
Hell yeah.
Don't use Laser Ship, by the way. Doug and I both had stuff stolen.
My God.
From what we
more
believe,
than once.
Yeah, believe was Laser Ship employees.
And then they said they delivered it, and I was like, no, you didn't. And they were like, oh yeah, they did. And they took a picture of it. And I was like, could you show me the picture? And they were like, oh yeah, we can't find that. And I was like, yes, because there's not one, because I have video cameras on the whole driveway, and nobody pulled in my driveway. And they're like, well, maybe they delivered it to one of your neighbors. And I'm like, I can actually see all my neighbors from my camera. They did not deliver anything on the 6 houses that I can see on my camera.
Okay, see if you can find an NVIDIA graphics card on eBay that was Doug's, because that's where it was delivered. No, I mean,
Tyler's got it.
Kind of along those lines, right? Like, do you carry tools of the trade, or do you try and carry everyday objects that could be tools of the trade? Because I hear and read things about butter knives and forks being used to breach physical entry. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, Deviant.
Yeah, I mean, everything is as mission dictates, right? You have some really non-permissive environments where you're going through kind of almost like TSA style screening at the front door, and you don't want to stand out. So you want to make sure your gear looks as innocuous as possible. And other times where, like you're not getting a pat down on the way in, but you can't carry the kitchen sink. I'm very kind of MacGyverish like that. I want to roll as slick and slim as I can. And that's oftentimes just going to be mostly bypass tools. And my other stuff is like, in the car or something. And if I run into something I can't get through, well, all right, I already got through the door once. I'll go outside and get whatever crazy leashy 2-in-1 tool to attack some lock that because even again, like I picked a lock, both Bobak and I run a job just the other week. We picked locks on secure closets. But like, if I have modern tools, sure, I'll stick the leashes in there and use them instead of regular picks, because why not? I got the advantage with that special, like, oh God, I love 2-in-1 tools these days. People think they're gimmicky, but I think they're great. But I had to go out to the car to get it.
What's an example of like a 2-in-1 tool?
So leashy tool, I think I probably have a pick roll.
I know you got one handy.
I was going to say, do you have a lock pick in your Santa hat? Because I think that would be pretty good if you did.
That would be pretty slick. Let's see down here. There we go. So the leashy picks are kind of these Johns, where in addition to, if I can finagle one out around there we go. So you have obviously like a, kind of a Turner arm acting here, but let's see if the autofocus product showcase mode go, right? You actually have a graduated scale here because you're manipulating a working tip, right? You're actually engaging with, you're decoding the lock as you pick it. Right. So once you've got the lock open, we can then generate a key. You don't have to, continue to manipulate that lock every time you want to get back in that door.
That's pretty cool.
Which keyways do they have those for? No, it's Schlage and what else?
So Schlage Quickset Master Lock, although, I mean, you don't really need one for a Master Lock. They do have them for best locks. The A2 system, the SFIC is a little bit challenging in some ways because of the multiple shear lines, but we've gotten bests to work. There are now, not everywhere, on redteamtools.com, you can get Lockwood style, which is an Australian brand that has some penetration overseas. And I don't know if anyone else is selling this yet, but I'm evaluating ones for Yale and Chisa, which have this very paracentric keyway. And for the longest time, I didn't think it would be feasible to make a 2-in-1 tool that would fit and manipulate that way with a secondary arm. But yeah, I've got a few, and maybe they'll get thrown up on the site in a few weeks.
Those should go to private sale first.
I could do that for you, man.
Do you have any advice for people that are acquiring these tools? Because when we were doing this, again, we had corporate legal and all this kind of stuff, and a lot of stuff we were doing was in Texas, where it's kind of like Wild West anyway, and they weren't. Mm-hmm. But like in Rhode Island, possession of burglary tools, which this would qualify, is illegal, and you can actually be arrested for having wrecking bars, lock picks, all this kind of stuff in your vehicle. And I actually was back then I worked for the state police a lot, and I actually asked them, I was like, would you charge me with this? And they said, yeah, they probably would if you got stopped. And I was like, so how do I register this? Is it like a firearm, and I need to fill out a form or something? And they didn't really have an answer to that. They were like, don't carry burglary tools in your car. I was like, but it's my job.
Actually, Rhode Island, it's totally legal. You have to show intent to have it counted as a burglary tool. Now, will they charge you with it? Oh, of course. Mm-hmm. But you can beat that in a court of law.
Or I think if you gave a lockpicking demonstration to the law enforcement officer, they would think that's so cool they'd probably let you go.
Well, yeah, I wasn't that worried about it, because also in Rhode Island, it's kind of like, hey, Doug, how you doing? And they're like, exactly. I had your class, and like, oh yeah, hi, how's it going?
I was like, hey, Tom, you just we were at my Boy Scout meeting with my son and stuff.
Exactly. But I was something I was thinking about, because I have seen that kind of stuff on the books, and there's always that discussion with PI boards and stuff like that about can you carry lock
so what's the state
around?
of that, Deviant, to your knowledge?
So, well, for everyone at G Unit in Rhode Island is the Criminal Code Section 11.8, Subpart 7, if I'm not mistaken. And you are correct. They are many things are described as burglary tools under the law. They have a really cool litany of things among the examples they give, like key nipper and key bit, false key, and so forth. But Josh is completely correct. There is an intent clause, as there is in many states' criminal statutes with regard to burglary tools, because many of the things that are quote burglary tools, as you said, are pry bars and what we'll call multi-purpose or dual-purpose implements,
butter knife,
monkey wrenches, right? So we sell these at Home Depot. Like, people do have them, and because of that, if there is demonstrable intent that you have, are about to commit a crime, or there's evidence that you just did commit a crime, you can be facing charges. If there is no demonstrable intent in the overall circumstance, ostensibly, you're not supposed to be facing charges. We all, of course, know that the nature of anyone's interaction with state authorities is dictated a lot more than just the letter of the law. It's dictated by everyone's attitude that day and time of day and all the surrounding circumstances. And there's a lot you can do to sort of just not be a target. We talk about this just in general in social engineering, right? Just don't stand out. And if you do catch on someone's radar, don't give them a reason to keep scratching the surface. And a lot of that comes down to the way you present yourself and the way you be, of course, I've got these tools. Yeah, sure. If they see the tools, right? Like, oh yeah, of course, I've got them here because it's part of my job. Did they find those tools in a laptop bag, or did they find them rolled up in like a fake, what do they call those? Like voids and traps. What are those freaking things where like people smuggle drugs in cars, right?
Yeah.
Like, did they find it in a secret hold?
Yeah, that was my experience at TSA. Even just to give you an example of, I think exactly what you're talking about. I had a lockpick set in my bag, and I was going through security, I think in Louisville, coming home from DerbyCon. Yeah. And TSA agent, searches my bag. She pulls out my lockpicks, and she holds them up, and she's like, "What are these?" And I'm like, "Those are lockpicks." And she's like, okay, I just want to make sure you weren't going to lie to me. Right. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, right? If I had been like, like, I don't know what those are. Those, you tell me. I don't know.
I'm holding it for a friend.
Yeah. Then she would have started digging a little more like, what do you mean you don't know what those are? They're in your bag, right?
Well, they took my lock picks and my chopsticks in Kansas City. They said the chopsticks were a potential deadly weapon and the lock picks might be used. And I was like, what? But yeah, I mean, it was
Kansas
most places.
City's a pain in my ass.
Well,
they were
me too. I was like, oh my God, what? And she was like, she didn't even know what the chopsticks were, and she took them. And I was like, they're chopsticks. They're like plastic chopsticks. Just throw them away. And she's like, I'm going to have to get a supervisor down here. And I was like, of course, he came down and was like, Mildred, those are chopsticks. They use them for Chinese food. And she was like, well, he's not Chinese. And I was like, yeah, but other people can eat Chinese food.
He's not Chinese. How come he gets to have them?
Yeah.
Like, come on, people. It's ridiculous.
Very bizarre.
By the way, every time you go through TSA and they give you problems, just point them at Evan Booth's sites, Terminal Cornucopia. I love watching their faces when they realize what you can buy behind security and turn it into.
Yeah. No, it's very true.
Very interestingly, Kansas City is Missouri, and Missouri's criminal statute for burglary tools, which I believe is Section 590, subpart, who the hell knows. Missouri only mentions forcible entry in burglary tools. So you could make the case, although I doubt this has any case law history, that lockpicks would not be burglary tools in the state of Missouri because there's nothing forcible about their use.
Forcibly asking for a supervisor doesn't even work there. So
I did avoid going to jail in Rhode Island because I got held for over an hour by TSA because I had a guitar stomp box in my bag, and the guy did not know what it was and said it had a 9-volt battery in it and it looked like possibly an explosive, and they contacted the bomb squad. And I was like, can you just let me call somebody? I could call somebody in the bomb squad. I know them, and I'll just make a call, and they can probably explain this. And finally, somebody else came in and was like, what do you got here? And I was like, it's a guitar box. And the guy was like, that's a guitar box, Ted. Yeah. I was like, get a guitar. I'll plug it in. It's like, come on. And then they let me go.
So we now have the names for the tech clueless. It's Ted and Mildred.
Yeah, and Glenn. Don't forget Glenn. That was before the show. That was a pre-show thing there.
But I think, Devin, what you were mentioning earlier is lock picking and using some of these specific lock picking tools on a physical security assessment often isn't the way that you get in. It's all these other creative ways.
Yeah.
The one that always comes to mind for me, I think you were presenting at Wild West Hacking Fest, showing how Dave Kennedy could blow a really big vape cloud right from his vape device when he was into that kind of thing through the crack in the door to trigger the re-entry sensor.
Absolutely. Yeah, the rec sensors are still there, man, because again, so those who don't know, recs or request to exit, they are part of any electronic physical access control system, or most physical access control systems that have door sensors. So typically the way it works is you will have what's called a door position switch or a door contact switch or sensor. And if the access control system sees the state of a door change, so the door goes open and then shuts, the access control logic will say, well, was that event preceded by a valid credential presentation? Okay, no, it wasn't. Well, was that event preceded by an egress, a REX sensor tripping? And it was? Cool. Okay, so the request to exit sensor was tripped, then the door opened. That's a normal user egressing, no alarm.
The request to exit is sensing a person walking towards the door to exit, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, it didn't take long for these sensors, almost all of which are simple passive infrared motion sensors, the same kind you would have in a burglar alarm environment, which are super wideband. They're designed to pick up motion. They don't want false negatives. So instead of just using it as logic, so like, oh, do we have an alarm condition? They started saying, well, we have these electronically controlled locks on these doors. Why even make a user go through any machinations to unlock the door? If they get picked up by the Rex, just unlock the door. And that's what, as you're referencing, Dave, with it, blowing those fat clouds, right? It doesn't take a lot to set off infrared passive motion sensors.
I got one for that.
It unlocks the door. Boom.
And so wait, I'm sorry. Is that for fire safety or user convenience or a combination?
Almost all for user convenience and combination. NFPA or National Fire Protection Code, those stipulate that in any environment where feasible, during a fire or heat condition or smoke condition, doors must unlock. That's usually by building automation control. If the same thing that would trigger elevators to go on fire service mode.
Gotcha.
So the doors will, whether or not you got rec sensors or not, doors are unlocking if they're like mag locked or something like that. You have to facilitate egress.
Gotcha.
So no, what we're tripping is much more just related to simple access control logic. Because let's think about, in more secure environments, it's greater user friction. If you're not implementing it with a motion sensor, and there are better motion sensors, let's be clear. GE has been making the RCR Rex forever, which uses infrared and microwave radar. So they're and gated together. It has to see radar motion toward the door and heat. So, I mean, better sensors are out there. They, instead of costing $75, they're about $180, $190. So a little more. But if you're not using a sensor, you're using what, like push to exit buttons, which are, again, like a big user pain in the butt.
Right. Because if you're carrying something, you got to hit the button to open the door. Yeah.
The pandemic has changed that because of concerns about hygiene. We're moving much more in environments that have the little green mushroom. They're changing those out to wave your hand by the door, and that's your push to exit. It's like wave to exit. I've seen that even in restrooms now, but in like server data centers, I've seen it. So I think that's a cool middle of the road. It's harder to fake those out. You still can, but not nearly as easy as the simple infrared on the ceiling. Which again, like people have seen me blow a glass of whiskey through a door and open a bank late at night. People have seen Dave with his vape pen. People have seen so many funny hacks against those infrareds, which are still out there in the field.
A can of air, right? We'll do it as well.
Yeah.
We tried to. I first saw one of those. They had this was a long time ago, but they had an emergency situation. So if somebody approached the door from the inside, the door would unlock. And we got this idea that we could get a blow-up doll and slide it under the door because there was a gap and inflate it with compressed air and make it wiggle. And we were driving all over the place in another state trying to find a blow-up doll. And it was really sad that we could not find. We went to several of these sort of shops and they were like, yeah, they don't really sell those anymore. I was like, really? And I was like, we really need a blow-up doll. And the guy was like, I do too, buddy, but you know.
Jesus.
Well, anything that would inflate doesn't have to.
We could have done it with a beach ball or something. I think we talked about that, and we never did try it, but I think it would have worked because the way the sensor, if somebody was inside, the door unlocked because they wanted to let people escape, and so all you needed was something. It wasn't even infrared. It was just literally like enough motion, and we were trying to do stuff on the floor, but we couldn't quite get it to detect. But I was like, I bet if we had something that expanded and was higher, it would pop the door, and so it was just along those same lines.
So Mylar balloons are nice because you can slide them under and they're dead flat. And if you have a little can of helium,
there you go.
They have little birthday party cans that are like the size of a bowling ball. And you can let it go and then it'll kind of drift up and then it'll just eventually evaporate, fall out. Then it just sits on the ground. Oh, there's trash on the floor. Oh, well.
And you can keep it under your armpit for some heat and heat signatures.
Yeah.
Now, I am curious with the state of some of the more advanced secure systems that you've dealt with. Like, I've come into contact lately with a lot of multi-factor RFID and or biometric, where they're requiring multiple items. You got RFID and then a PIN, or RFID and a fingerprint. These biometrics and pieces. How are you seeing some of these implemented in the more secure environments that seem to be good? Obviously, the ESP key that you guys sell and is one of the best places to get those from is a fantastic way to get around some of these. But is there a lot of research around some of the newer kind of high secure environments?
There's not as much research as will happen once the backhaul data lines become more secured. Tyler, you referenced the ESP key. For those who don't know this tool, what he's talking about is if you have a credential reader on the wall, whether it's a standard boopy card and that's it, or whether it's like card and pin, or card like you got a Morpho reader that you're using biometric and your card and your pin, almost universally those are still communicating from reader to door controller. That backhaul is a pair of wires that are bits in the clear using an old protocol called the WeGAN protocol. And because that is still interceptable, we install a little sniffer. It's the size of a postage stamp. You can clamp it on the data line just behind the reader. And we have a whole module in class where we teach people how to get readers off the wall without setting off the tamper, which is never hooked up half the time. But yeah, because that WeGAN data bus is unencrypted, the new protocol, if anyone wants to push for this at your site, please do. It is called the OSDP, or Open Supervised Data Protocol. OSDP version 2 does support, but not by default, what's called secure channel. And if you enable secure channel, then the reader to panel, the reader to door controller communication is encrypted. But since that's not the norm, it doesn't matter how fancy-pantsy the user is interacting with something on the wall. What invariably happens, if you're curious, like let's say, here's a scenario, like an actual scenario from a data center where they were using credentials that were so new that the Morpho biometric reader didn't support this credential. Many of these readers, the biometric readers, they can support some RFID, but if you're using elite keys on a I-class system, or in this case, it was HID's super new product, not new anymore, but still their flagship product called CIOS. Signo is actually going to become their new hotness, but this was CIOS, which is a modern generation, still out there tech. They had a CIOS reader next to the fingerprint reader. And then the finger, obviously you need your fingerprint, right? So what was happening is we even took the fingerprint reader off the wall, and on the back, you can see data lines, and they literally say WeGANed in, WeGANed out. So you'd hit your super modern credential against the super modern reader. It would do in crypto, blah, 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 stuff I don't think CIOS has been super compromised yet, not publicly anyway. It would then take that amazing user credential payload that's just now decrypted, fart it out the back of itself in WeGANed, go right into the Morpho reader, which would hold that in a bucket until you would fingerprint, blah, blah, blah. And then if your fingerprint matched, it would release that WeGAN credential down the data lines. The first thing we showed the client was like, well, you could just take the Morpho off the wall, just literally connect. Here's WeGANed in, just connect the WeGAN lines. So if someone has your card, that just passes it straight through, and that unlocks the door. And that made them flip. They're like, oh my God, we paid how much for these Morpho readers? I'm like, oh yeah, you lit a small pile of money on fire. But if it's not encrypted, the Morpho reader's just one little gate that you take it out of the way. It's a speed bump. But really, as you point out, if you sniff that data line, now you're not just passing the WeGAN data through, you're catching it. And it's all in the clear. It's a simple data string in the clear, 26 bits if you're curious, with parity bits. And you could just replay it. You could then literally inject that WeGAN in another reader or another door somewhere else, because it's all the same payload, just in this very simple string. And until that gets encrypted, why is anyone going to bang their head into like the new way of? Like it's good at DEF CON, right? When some German group shows that they can hack the latest smartphone biometric. Great, cool, awesome demo. Make the industry better. Why not? But in terms of our practical effect in the field, why bother with that when WeGAN is still out there? We got to kill WeGAN.
Will that ever die though? Like having just got done working with the National Fire Protection Agency, and like they're just barely getting to writing the cybersecurity pieces to implement for building automation and building security for fire protection. Like building automation and building security in general, this is worse than OT and ICS from a security standpoint, and not getting that much better. So it's going to take a pretty big push from, practically people like you showing the risk, but I'm still not seeing that push make it to mainstream.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to fully die. Again, you and I have been on how many jobs together or separately, and we still find buildings running procs, right? Brand new, but like buildings that have gone up in the last 10 years, and they're using prox card, like HID's ISOProx 2, which was invented in 96. So some sites, there's a lot of momentum in the industry, and it's hard to break that. But it's you're never going to hit that finish line, but you can keep nibbling away at the edges and getting more and more buildings to like, all right, you just drag them little by little into the future.
Do you think some of that could be pushed via something like compliance, or say cybersecurity insurance is a great example? Like we've got big pushes that make a big difference because they control whether you get a policy or not and whether you get paid out and can run after ransomware. well, if we start to migrate this physical space into the cybersecurity and information security space where it falls underneath of one of those security agencies and is pushed via compliance. Like, I'm not a huge compliance guy. I love you to death, Jeff, but like, there's only so much that can do, but that seems to actually make the most effect because they tend to have the most teeth around some of this.
I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing it, especially in the insurance space. That's the kind of thing where that really impacts people's bottom line. And if their policy is invalidated, or if they just can't write new policies because they're so out of date, that's going to drive it, as well as a handful of big customers. Because really, it's as with many things in security, it's this round robin finger pointing game. We were there right as OSDP2 started to become at least feasible. But it's still like Bobic is on the working group. Like, you would say, okay, here's the standard works, great. Get me hardware that can run it. And, HID was like, all right, we're finally supporting OSDP2 in our readers. Awesome. Whose door controller supports it? And then Bobic's on the phone with, Software House or somebody. And he's like, no, all right, yeah, you sent me that giant new reader. It's in my lab. Yeah, I've hooked it up. No. Boop, credential? No, it doesn't work. And they're like, all right, send him a new firmware. And he flashes the firmware. He's like, boop. Nope, still doesn't work. You want me to hook it up to the oscilloscope? Do you want me to start using a logic analyzer and tell you what the output is? Because it's still not working. And so engineers just had to, like, the gear didn't work. Now that we finally have the gear working, that now moves like the ball. It's like pass the buck. And now you get to the customers. Are enough customers even aware of it? And finally there, it's, again, like, so much credit to him, and he's an amazing instructor in this space. Bobic is still with us. He's at Red Team Alliance. He's our main guy for the access control work we do. And his level of education of others at big trade shows and ISC West and GSX, we now have clients, and we're not going to name exact names, but like humongous nationwide bank, right? Like a massive bank that probably half of us use. 3 or 4 years ago, they privately said, like at a little lunch of some people in the industry, they said, Weekend is dead for us. We are not deploying any new access control at any new site unless our integrator can give us OSDP2. It's good enough and ready for showtime, and this is a few years ago, that they're like, we will not buy another new widget, Wonkit, Whamodyne 9000 awesome box if it still only runs Weekend. And it took that kind of pressure for the industry, so then now you got integrators. So integrators actually will understand how it works, and they'll install it because they have to. And once you get enough market penetration that insurance companies are like, all right, we're not going to experience holy hell from our customers, then eventually the industry of insurance is going to say, all right, we're going to start requiring this. It's my prediction with things like vaccine requirements on domestic flights. We're not there yet, even though a lot of people, probably myself included, wouldn't mind that. Because again, like, we just don't have enough buy-in. Once you get enough of the public that's already across the line, then someone somewhere can make it a standard or a requirement because they're not going to get rotten fruit thrown at them.
Deviant,
but unless that groundwork's there, it's not going to matter. If you can say anything you want, if people aren't doing it, it's not going to happen.
I want to segue how this transfers to the hotel industry, right? Because I think you were certainly the first person to amaze me with, well, you get this tool and it can just go under the door and it can open it. I was like, well, that's pretty amazing. But we've seen a lot of hacks with the electronics and software, hardware and software in the actual locks in the hotel. Like, how much stake does a hotel have? What's the state? Like, do you think hotel lock security physical controls are enough today, or do we still have some huge issues in that industry?
Are you a nation state or not?
Right. That's a good question to ask. Like, who's your adversary? I will say this for those who aren't familiar. And you can look there's a YouTube series that I've been on before, and they can't wait to have us back. Pandemic is a pandemic. It's called Modern Rogue. We're going to do a whole thing about travel security on the road. Yeah. Probably I'll be filming with them in a few months. But if you're not familiar, this blows people away when they don't know this. Like, why does every hotel nowadays have a safe? They're always kind of dodgy. And we could talk about hacking electronic safes, right? But why does even like your most crud bucket, $10 a night, value in the middle of nowhere, there's like this electronic safe? Because the hotelier is transferring risk to the customer if they provide a secure storage solution. If there's a safe in the room, then the hotel is not liable under almost every state's hospitality statutes, is not liable for theft from the room. If you had something that wasn't in the safe. And if it was in the safe and it was still stolen, they're going to say, we don't believe you. You didn't use the safe correctly or something. So you're kind of screwed there as well. But that's why hotels use the in-room safe, which are manufactured super cheaply. We have all kind of different ways to attack them, but they use that to transfer liability. So the question, is the hotel room door secure enough? Really, the only risk there is the potential for lawsuit if someone gets like assaulted in their room.
Right. That's really
There's always going to be an evil maid attack. There's always going to be the potential for surveillance gear, and you should always assume that the room is not a safe location. That's just good, OPSEC and PERSEC at that point.
Just a warning to viewers, after you watch all these videos, when you go on trips, you'll just sit in your hotel room with an automatic shotgun facing the door all night because you won't want to go out. Yeah,
I'm not sure I'd want to test the laws in that scenario either. Well,
in Texas, let me tell you, that's not only legal, it's encouraged. So
you might be interested to see some of the footage you capture on like a USB charging port that has a camera in it, or snaps of photos of your room being messed with. As much as we assume security, especially in first world countries and within the United States, depending on where you're from in the country, it's a pretty big assumption that we are always secure. We are always people have the best intentions, which you'll find as you travel a little bit more, or as you end up in different situations or different threat profiles. That is not so much the case, especially in hotels.
Deviant, you mentioned safes. My kids love to watch the YouTube videos where the ridiculous YouTube creators take out all these ridiculous. You've seen them, Tyler, right? They take out these ridiculous things to try and get into the safe. And I tell my kids, I'm like, they probably could have just guessed the PIN code on that one, or picked the backup lock, or if it's a safe with a concrete bottom, that's where you hit it with the sledgehammer. But they're attacking it with a speed square just for show. That's not going to do anything to the safe. They're going about this all the wrong way. You don't have
a sense of drama, Paul.
That's
drama.
All it is.
You've got to have timing and drama and dramatic dents and people screaming and jumping up and down and
drop the anvil on it, the whole.
Right.
It's so
but
stupid.
They found the safe in the backyard though too. That's the other thing. Shit, come on. When did you find a safe in your backyard?
Never.
After you visited, Tyler?
You need 25 minutes of drama, so you still have 5 minutes left for commercials before you succeed in opening the safe. Come on, Paul.
So, Deviant, walk us through safe basics in terms of breaching.
Sure. So we can split this into mechanical safe locks and electronic safe locks. Mechanical is, slower, ostensibly slower because a pin pad is quick, but still there are ways to attack mechanical locks. They take a lot longer. I run a safe manipulation class. I've taught it a number of places, and it's just a methodical series of very close measurements of the dial, and you're manipulating the dial to cause the safe to leak some information out at you very, very gradually. And that's just with a simple, grade 2 safe lock. There's a group 2 safe locks are what most safes, at a hardware store or a Cabela's or something, if you can even find a mechanical lock, that's what you're going to have. There's group 1, which is used it used to be used more often in government land. Now, all of my, government people know that it's electromechanical locks, but that's not really in civilian world. But even just a group 2M, it's really funny that I love the concept of how manufacturers tried to make mechanical locks more manipulation resistant, and they did it by making them more error prone. One of the things, we're not going to get super deep in the weeds here, right? But so you're trying to, without being able to see the inside of the safe, you're trying to manipulate the dial in a way that you can infer from the numbers, looking at how they're behaving, where certain elements in the safe are contacting. There's what's called a nose that drops into a gate on the cam, the drive cam. And you're all right, I can tell the nose of the fence is kind of leaning this way. All right, I feel it touching, blah, blah, blah. Well, manufacturers, they just put what's called an eccentric roller in the nose of the cam. It's just a weird little, not perfectly round knob that does nothing. It'll still drop into the, to the gate. But because it's this weird shape, sometimes it'll touch the gate wrong and it'll so all of a sudden this safe is like giving you really weird readings. And they did it by it's like when you teach people to pick locks, you don't immediately give them the hardware store master number 3. It's a very easy lock to pick, but it's actually so janky that they're like, I don't get any good feedback out of this. We're like, I know. We'll work you up to that. It's crappy. It's so crappy. I don't want to train you on it. So things like mechanical safe locks only. I have a bunch of Group 2M and Group 1 safe locks on all of my safes. We got a lot of safes in the basement here. They keep growing because the collection keeps growing. But when it comes to electronic locks, this is, again, a fascinating topic.
I want to go to your previous point because I do find it interesting where sometimes if I can't pick a lock, and even people way more skilled than I, which is a lot of people, can't pick it, oftentimes that lock is damaged, right? Like cases where I've had to go like other mechanisms and like just physically cut stuff is they're like, why can't you pick it? I'm like, the lock is damaged. Like someone has damaged the lock with a key or like whatever it is. I'm like, if it's damaged, it's like becomes a really difficult lock to pick. And that's what you're describing with the safe mechanism, I think, as well.
Yeah. And as far as electronics, nowadays everyone wants the simple to use like pin pad, like even safe dials, they look like big safes, but they're just pin pads now. The big thing there, and this has been for a while, Lockmasters has sold a product called the Little Black Box, which is actually designed by a friend of ours named Dan. He was the original engineer. And now that Mr. Locksmith has a competing product, but they both do side channel attacks. They do what's called differential power analysis. And again, without getting super into the weeds, the viewers might find this really cool if you want to read up on it. Essentially, what's happening is that whenever these locks power up, if you give them input like, here's my code, well, it needs to compare that to a known, like what's the actual code? And it'll read that code out of memory because these safes are usually in a powered down state. So it's in non-volatile memory. So it'll read the code and then do some logic on chip. Well, when you read memory out of, like solid state memory, it costs more power to read a 1 than to read a 0. We're talking microamps, right? But all these dials tend to have power lines on the outside because if the battery dies, like, well, you got to swap the battery. So all the power is on the outside of the safe. So you can attach a device that will power up the safe, providing its own power and monitoring the power draw. And it can read right out of memory. It can see see the chip.
I think I did
read the code out of memory.
Yeah, the article that I read was it was more power to read a 1 than a 0. I remember seeing that paper and reading it. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's been shown at DEF CON a few times. It's been a known thing that people would do with like oscilloscopes.
Yeah.
But Dan and Lockmasters and others were the ones who really made it a turnkey product that locksmiths have now.
It's amazing.
So how do you tell people what to choose if everything's defeatable? I mean, how do we establish what's good enough?
How much time you got?
Threat modeling, you consider what your most likely attack is. For a lot of us, it's, I think we don't live in like supreme high crime. The government's trying to break into my stuff. Like most of us have just the occasional curious teenager, who might watch too much YouTube like the rest of us. And we trust our kids like to a point. But I honestly like the idea of just putting a monitoring device inside the safe so that if the safe opens, you get like an instant alert, maybe even with a photo of what's going on. And if you never get that alert, cool. If you do get that alert and it's like your kid, you're going to have a conversation at dinner that night and talk about restricting someone's Xbox and be grounding them and be like, all right, now we also have to talk about why that's not okay.
Yeah.
And if it's someone who's not your kid, then you're immediately like, honey, get home and get the other safe open and get the shotgun.
Yeah, and taking that advice, teaching my kids how to lockpick, right? Now I'm like, oh crap. And so my gun saves, my phone gets an alert if that door opens, right? Both my wife and I actually get an alert if the door's open to any of the gun safes because you have to have some kind of backup, right?
Yeah, you can actually, something that I've seen some people do is put a door sensor on the door on the outside of the safe or on the side of the safe or wherever it works, and then from a separate security system, like a different security system, put a motion sensor inside the safe. So the door sensor will trigger if they've attacked that security system. I've seen this in like 2 or 3 houses of people I cannot and shall not name. But then there's a second, fully independent alarm system with the motion sensor inside the safe. If the motion sensor goes off, that could be fine. If you're not there, it's probably not fine.
Yeah. Agreed. That's awesome stuff. Any more questions for Deviant? We could continue.
Yeah,
we
for a while.
almost need to do a whole safe one all in and of itself, right? Because that's a totally separate top. I mean, the mechanisms and all of that stuff are completely separate for safes, except for the ones that have like a tubular lock backup, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm curious, where can we find you? What are you up to? What's latest research? What should we be looking for? Other than that,
Yeah.
I miss you.
So I am, at Deviant Olaf, spelled not at all like it sounds, on all the things. I'm on Twitter where I swear a lot. I'm on Instagram where I like my friends' food pictures. I'm on YouTube. I'm on GitHub. Someone told me the other day, I checked. I was like, you're shitting me. I am like this close to being 100,000 on YouTube, apparently. So
nice. A lot of people.
I'm a non-monetized channel. I'm just an odd collection of BS on YouTube. But if you want to subscribe, that'll be fun to get me over that finish line. I'll watch that odometer tick, I guess.
Awesome. Deviant, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly.
Wait, Paul.
Oh, sorry.
We need to ask him the revised 5th question, please.
Oh,
Just the 5th question, or all of them?
The revised. No, just the revised.
The revised
the
one.
new
Oh, okay. So, Deviant, what is your favorite hacker movie?
so it's going to have to be. In fact, look at this. Like as if I didn't even prepare this, but bam, we're going to
there
go
you go.
speakers.
I knew I was going to get one in my column.
That's it.
Yeah.
Jeff did that just to
That's the
pad
only
his
reason.
column.
Just to pad the score. Thank you, Deviant.
Yeah, we're gonna for these questions. I'm going to switch to black hat. There you go.
There you go. Oh, the black Santa hat.
Yeah.
Your outfit
right.
changed a couple times. Very nice, Deviant. We all miss you. We all miss seeing you at conferences and hanging out in person. So hopefully we can get back to that soon. Thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
Thank you. I miss every one of you, and my wife is waving as well. She's the one who handed me the black hat. So Tara and I would love to see all of you again very soon, and stay safe so we can all get back together. Thank you for being here with me.
Absolutely. Thank you. With that, coming up next, John Matherly from Shodan. Stick around.